One gross generalization I've heard about juries is that after a verdict, when they're coming out to deliver the verdict, you can tell if they've acquitted a client or a defendant because they're willing to look over at the defendants. And did you have any of those superstitions or beliefs going in? And did you see any of that play out when the jury walked out? I mean, it was such a fast moment, but what were you thinking there from their body language or their looks? Anything?
Well, I've been around a little longer than Max, and so I can tell you that we always think that. But I watched every one of them come out, and only one really looked over our way and kind of grinned a little bit, but she was always in a happy mood anyway. And so I really couldn't tell. It was kind of like when they came out for questions. It was almost like they purposefully didn't look at us.
Right. Yeah, no, my experience was the same. I think I had slight eye contact with one of the jurors, but it wasn't anything that gave anything away. But I did notice, just in my experience, especially in a case like this, which I thought we had, by the end of the trial, we had a very legitimate chance of winning. Mm-hmm. I felt in something that, in a case where the jurors had been around my client for over a year, I noticed that they did not seem to be tense, and they seemed to be kind of relieved when they came out, and I took that as a good sign. They didn't make any faces or anything, but they didn't have the look of a group of people that were sending someone that they had been around for a year to prison for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, the way the trial started out was we were surrounded by sheriffs and marshals in the courtroom everywhere.
Yeah, that's another good
There
point.
was about 10 of them in there that we would count. And when we came into the courtroom, we actually had our bags searched the second time. We had to go through the general population barrier, and they would go through the metal detectors and all that, and we clear it. And that gets you in any other place in the courtroom except for this trial, anywhere. And so when we go in there, they would pull out everything out of our bag. It had already been searched by the metal detectors and the sheriff's deputies and everything. And then we go into the courtroom, and they're just standing all behind you and all of that. And yeah, we worried about what a jury would think about, well, these guys must be pretty bad. If you got this many people trying to, or either something may happen in here.
Yeah.
And another thing that Mr. Botts, I think, is saying is when the verdict came in, when it's not going your way, you tend to see dozens of deputies all of a sudden in the room waiting for an emotional outburst or to tackle someone, and see all those deputies. So when I think back, that was a sign too, but I didn't really catch it at the time. I was just, everything happened so fast.
And that's because a few of the sheriffs told us that we think you win in the case. And I remember one especially commented and complimented, really, Max on one of his brilliant cross-examinations of the witness. You got that right.
Wow. And do you remember who it was?
Now Mr. Botts is telling secrets. Mr. Botts, you don't remember anything.
Remember who the witness
secrets.
was?
Stop, Mr. Botts.
Can you say who the witness was?
He made a great cross-examination. That was not a secret.
Can you say who the witness was, just for the record? Or
no, it wasn't a witness. It was
he should say
or who the witness was that he cross-examined that the deputy complimented. We don't need the deputy's name.
Well, there was more than one, but there were several deputies that we got a good feeling from. The ones that were supposed to be guarding us, all of a sudden, I think became accustomed to, these guys are not any problem. They're not going to cause us any trouble. Right. And hopefully the jury picked up on that. Instead of somebody standing over them all the time, they'd actually talk with them and communicate, and they were humanized.
Right. And that was actually, I put some thought into that, and I will say we put some thought into that. And I will say that the deputies that were in there were so professional, but and this but is not saying that they weren't professional, but they were also human. And so anytime there was a friendly interaction between Shannon and law enforcement, even if they're just playing around, because I mean, we all knew each other at that point for so long, and there's a level of trust and respect between the deputies and my client and the deputies in Jeffrey. The more interactions that are just normal, and it just looks like these are not hardened guys, but guys that even in this situation are able to interact with law enforcement and smile and joking kid. I thought it was good. And we did have some of that. We did have some of that. And there needed to be some of that because, you know, no one could go a year plus or 2 years and just everything's law and order and strict regiment. That was just unrealistic.
Yeah. Ashley asked if did one of the jurors wear a Boyz in the Hood shirt the day the verdict was announced? Did you notice that of all the details in the courtroom?
You know, I did notice it, and it didn't really stink. It was like I was like, oh, okay, but then I was, you know, I didn't really take it for the message that probably.
And it was investigator. Sorry to interrupt. It was investigator Dennis, right? Who testified. Was it Dennis who testified
Right.
that he watched Boyz in the Hood, and you know that was some of he had cited that in testimony, and then it was like, oh, so that's what informs your experience here is Boyz in the Hood. But okay,
that was one of those clues that I could have probably picked up on, but again, I was on the verge of passing out. So
yeah, and you know, I mean, all hell breaks loose after a verdict is read. I remember a judge I know in Orange County said that he was once ordered to duck under the bench by the deputies because all the family members in the courtroom were freaking out. What was it like in the moments after the verdict? I mean, this was celebration overall, wasn't it? Except for the victims' families, but I understand Drinks' family left pretty quick.
I don't honestly, I don't remember. I just remember hugging Shannon, and then I remember going to we spoke to the jurors, but it was kind of like I wasn't able to comprehend anything else that was going on around me at that point.
There was, I looked, and there was no reaction because the visitors, the family, and all that were told by the judge that I'm going to read the verdict and I want absolutely no outbursts or no emotion or anything like that. And they honored that. So you heard nothing come from them.
And I'll say this, I try to always mention this, and you know, I don't know if it will. I'm saying this in good faith and trying to help. I don't know if it does in any way, but the Drinks family, they showed up every day towards the end because that's when we were dealing with Mr. Drinks's death. And they've been through a lot. Yeah. And the Thomas family too. But I would see the Drinks family more because it's a small hallway. I mean, it's a small hallway and everyone's in there. We got girlfriends, we got victims' families, we got attorneys running around. We have everyone in this small hallway. And so I'd walk past them and I would always kind of acknowledge them, shake my head, and they would acknowledge me and they would smile, and there was no animosity. And, you know, just a level of, obviously I'm doing my job, but some people don't take it that way. And the level of grace that some people show, it's just kind of blows my mind. And, you know, I wish that family nothing but the best.
Yeah. Wow. That's,
I didn't talk to them, but they seem like very nice people.
That's good to hear. Cause that had to have been such a stressful situation for everyone involved to have, you know, the victims and the defendants all kind of right there in the mix. But it sounds like everybody there was never any major issue. It sounds like that day or any other days.
No, there was not at all. And we need to get to a place at the end of this, and I'm working on it. We need to get a place where the verdict is the verdict, and all the back and forth and violence and street justice needs to stop.
Yes.
And we need to get to a point, and I don't know if we're there yet, where the jury's verdict is respected, and we're rooting for everyone to move on, to be productive and successful. And that includes Shannon, that includes Kenneth Copeland, that includes Jeffrey, that includes Kelvin Watts, that includes the Drinks family, the Thomas family. And that's where I want, there's needs to be some healing, and I hope we get there.